Thank you and good afternoon. It's my pleasure to introduce our speaker today. I can promise you it's going to be an education and interesting program. For those of you who haven't had the pleasure or penance of serving on the Speakers Committee with Charlie Oberst, I want to assure you that he passes the Charlie Oberst test because he is an excellent speaker. Charlie never cares about the message, just the delivery. If you didn't see the title of Ryan's presentation, I want to share it with you because it kind of sets us up for the day. More than cows, plows, and sows, the Kentucky Department of Agriculture. Ryan is a native of Georgetown, Kentucky. He grew up on a family farm that's been in his family for more than 200 years, passing down from generation to generation. He graduated as valedictorian and class president from Scott County High School. I tell you that only because Louisvilles have such an obsession with where you went to high school. I wanted you to know where he went to high school, but also to set the stage for his remarkable journey. While working at the Quarles family farm, he went to college. And before we talk about Ryan's years at college, I want you to reflect back about your time in college and the 4 years you spent there, what you learned, accomplished, and the fun you had. And now I want to tell you what Ryan did. In less than 4 years, he completed triple major undergraduate degrees and 2 master's degrees. He was one of 25 National Zuckerman Fellows and awarded a full scholarship to Harvard, where he completed a master's in education. He then came back to the University of Kentucky to finish his Juris Doctorate. At the age of 26, Ryan ran and was elected to the Kentucky House of Representatives for 3 terms, serving Scott, Owen, and Fayette counties. He was elected Kentucky's Commissioner of Agriculture in 2015. Under his leadership, the department has started several new programs, including initiatives to combat hunger and connect Kentucky farmers to new markets. He has supported the expansion of Kentucky's diverse agricultural portfolio, including industrial hemp. I'm sure we'll hear more about that today. On the national level, Ryan serves as the Secretary-Treasurer of the National Association of State Departments of Agriculture, and he is chairman of the Republican Agriculture Commission's Committee. At the age of 34, Ryan is the youngest statewide elected official in the nation. Ladies and gentlemen, Ryan Quarles.
Well, thank you so much for that generous introduction. The one thing you forgot to mention is how much student loan debt I have as well with all those degrees, but it's an honor to be here, and as the Commissioner of Agriculture, I always want to take a moment to say thank you for those who prepared our food, but more importantly, the farmers that grew it. So let's give them a round of applause for a wonderful lunch that we had today. It's an honor to be here today, and let's just think about it. Think about what we just did. We just broke bread and ate. That's something that most people take for granted. It happens every day. But if you look at agriculture in a more basic way, we are an occupation that enables you to do something else with your life besides raising food and making sure that your family has food on the table. We are an occupation of necessity. We're one that allows for specialization in society. When you have 1% of the population feeding the rest of the country, and here in America, since we're a net exporter, feeding the rest of the world, it allows the rest of society to specialize in the different occupations. It was not always this way. We're just 3 generations removed from the family farm. After World War II, half of all Americans either grew up on a farm or their parents did, and how things have changed since then. In the past 50 years, if you look at where agriculture is today versus where we were 50 years ago, we have doubled the amount of food we produce with 22 million less workers, and we're only farming about 76% of the land that we used to grow on. So apply those same statistics to your industry of business. If you've doubled your output with less workers and less inputs, that's what we've done in American agriculture, and we continue to do it today. And if you woke up this morning, grabbed a cup of coffee, if you're wearing clothes today, if you've eaten, without agriculture, we literally would be naked and afraid right now because we are the food and fiber industry. But things have changed. And today I'm just going to cover a few topics. We're going to make sure we have some time at the end for some questions, but we are more than just cows, plows, and sows in Kentucky. In fact, we have 76,000 farms across our state. And I'd like to remind people, particularly in Frankfort, that those 76,000 farms are actually 76,000 small businesses making payroll, helping the rural economy. And here in Louisville, it's still a big part of your economy. We'll talk about that here in a second. We're responsible for $45 billion in economic activity in our state. And if you look at our total GDP of just over $206 billion, we punch above our weight class in agriculture. And it's something I take a lot of pride in when I travel a state. We're responsible for over 200,000 jobs in our state, just under manufacturing, if you look at our economic impact. On the national level, agriculture is responsible for over $7 trillion of our $19 trillion GDP. We're responsible for 1 in 5 jobs in America. And last year, we exported over $140 billion worth of ag exports. And a lot of them were good Kentucky Proud exports. Because when I travel the state, people ask where you're from. I say the Commonwealth of Kentucky. What comes to mind? Bourbon, agriculture product, racehorses, agriculture product, and fried chicken, agriculture product. Because the most famous Kentuckian to ever live was Colonel Sanders. And so that's our identity when we're out selling Kentucky to an international global market, is that they're known, our reputation's already set up for high quality agricultural products. And here in our state, unlike our friends in the Midwest, all those I states where their ag economies focus on 3, maybe 4 different commodities, here in Kentucky, we celebrate diversity because we are a small farm state. The average size of our farm is only 160 acres. And if you're challenged with what an acre is, it's about the size of a football field. The national average is over 460, and so we are forced to do more with less in our state, primarily because we used to be a big tobacco state. And anyone here ever worked in tobacco? Just raise your hand. No, keep your hand raised if you're working in tobacco in 2018. That shows you, and the more rural the counties, the bigger the difference. That shows you how much our economy has changed. At one point, we had over 85,000 Kentuckians growing tobacco back in the 1990s. Now we have less than 4,000. And we have diversified. And because of that, we have a high-quality beef herd. We have more beef cattle than any other state east Mississippi River. Chicken is our #1 commodity. Half of the poultry eaten around the world has its genetics traced back to Kentucky. And so it's important to realize that we are really focusing in the post-tobacco world on innovation, on research, and making sure we sharpen that knife every day to make sure that Kentucky agriculture can continue to thrive. And that's why if you go down to local farmers market here in Louisville, you'll see farmers who are growing everything from apples to zucchinis and everything in between. And that's something I take a lot of pride in because not only do we do it, but we do it well. And here in Louisville, we pulled some statistics this morning. You still have 382 farms right here in Jefferson County, encompassing over 23,000 acres. And it's important to realize that Louisville is home to 3 signature agricultural events each year. Agricultural events that other states are envious of. The #1 state fair in America is the Kentucky State Fair. And we'll be cutting the ribbon next Thursday morning down at the fairgrounds. And I hope you get a chance to join us and 600,000 other people to walk through the fairgrounds and get some face time with a cow, meet a farmer, and eat some ridiculous food. I know there's a donut burger this year that people are talking about. So please come down. The largest purebred livestock show in the world is held in Louisville, Kentucky each November. People from around the world come here to see genetics at their best. And of course, my favorite agricultural event each year is the National Farm Machinery Show. It's like the Detroit Auto Show for the tractor companies. So John Deere and Case IH, they come to Louisville to show off the latest and greatest in tractor technology and other agriculture technology. And the best thing about it, it's always held during Valentine's Day. So if you're looking for something special for your loved one to do, come down to the fairgrounds, bring your significant others, and look at tractors, because that's what I do each year as well. But that puts Louisville on the map. And so when I'm trying to sell us around the world, it's unfortunate to have 3 signature ag events right here in Louisville where people come here. People come here, so it's easier to sell. Kentucky ag is big. We rank top 15 in grain, both corn, wheat, and soybeans. Billion-dollar crops each year, in and out. We have the largest livestock yard east Mississippi River in Lexington, Bluegrass Stockyards. It's an amazing story of a company that burnt down to the ground 2 years ago, back up on their feet. Of course, we are the destination state for horses. 2 out of 3 horses that are exported out of the United States come from Kentucky. We are dominant. And with 2 Triple Crown winners in recent years, both were Kentucky proud, Kentucky bred horses, we continue to be the epicenter of the racehorse industry. And Churchill Downs, what better advertisement than the first Saturday in May that the 2 minutes, the fastest 2 minutes in sports, Kentucky gets international spotlight each year so we can help sell our state. And when it comes to research, Kentucky's an innovation state. And I'll give you a few examples. When President Roosevelt was tired of dirt, or soil that we call it in the ag community, soil from Oklahoma landing on the White House during the Great Dust Bowl, which actually happened, he sent a guy named Hugh Bennett out to the Midwest to say, what can we do to keep the soil where it's supposed to stay at in the ground? He stopped in Kentucky, because here in our state, we're used to farming ground like this. We're used to farming ground that's challenging. And the conservation practices that were invented here in Kentucky were used to help mitigate the largest man-made disaster in American history in the 1930s. Happened here. In 2014, there's a severe Ebola outbreak in West Africa. They took a Kentucky tobacco plant, genetically modified it, and turned it into a vaccine that helped save people's lives right here in Kentucky. And of course, when you talk about innovation, we were always looking for more conservation-oriented practices. There's a practice called no-till corn, which prevents farmers from having to plow the ground. They actually plant the seeds into undisturbed organic matter from the year before, cuts down on diesel fuel, cuts down on environmental effects, and yields have gone up. That practice was invented here in Kentucky, and we'll continue to do it again. And of course, in our state, we're not just talking about the crops that we grow, but also or about the livestock that we raise, but also what we're making out of it. Raise your hand if you've ever had a biscuit from McDonald's in your life. All right, I know there's some liars out there, and everyone raise their hand. I'm pretty sure everyone has had a biscuit from McDonald's at some point in your life. If you've had one anywhere on the East Coast of the United States, that biscuit came from Kentucky. If you've ever gone to Cracker Barrel and ordered sausage, there are 647 locations in the United States, that sausage came from Kentucky. When you fill up your tank with gas, 10% of it, more or less, is corn. It's ethanol. More than likely came from a West Kentucky corn grower processed in Hopkinsville. And of course, we even process food here in our state that we don't even grow. The world's largest peanut butter processing plant, the largest one on the face of this earth, is in Lexington, Kentucky. We don't even grow peanuts in our state. And so it kind of shows you that we are really focusing on economic development and adding value to those crops. And so when we have new innovative crops like industrial hemp or indigo or chia, we have the largest chia farm in North America in Kentucky. We're trying to add value to it to give our farmers an opportunity. Now, a lot of us grew up in the ag community, a lot of us grew up on farms, and I hope that a few of you all had that opportunity as well. I'm the 9th generation of my family to be engaged in agriculture in some capacity since my family moved here in the 1780s. And agriculture is a story of small towns. It's a story of yearly optimism. It's a story of innovators and risk takers who throw seeds out each year, pray for the best, and hope for a good harvest and good prices that fall. But it's also a story about a unique upbringing. I grew up in 4-H, grew up in FFA, which is the Future Farmers of America, grew up in Farm Bureau. I like to tell people that one of the first jobs I had on my farm was shoveling cow manure because it prepared me for politics in Kentucky, and because it can get waist deep sometimes. But it continues to be a challenge, and I love my job. I love my job. But there are changes. We have a consumer who gets most of their information off of this now. We have food marketers that are making claims in grocery stores that in the ag world are little, I think there's some misrepresentation going on sometimes in grocery stores. But we also have a consumer trend of people wanting to know about where their food comes from. And that's why Kentucky Proud is such a special program for us, because we were ahead of the curve. Long before the farm-to-table movement got started at the Kentucky Department of Agriculture, we're already selling our story of saying, if you want to buy something that came from a local farmer, buy Kentucky Proud. And that program continues to grow. We have over 7,000 members. After 2 years of work with my office and the Kentucky Cattlemen's Association, you can now go to a Louisville Kroger store and buy a 100% Kentucky Proud ground beef product. This took 2 years for us to do. We've already sold 50,000 pounds of beef that was bred here, fed here, processed in Eastern Kentucky, bringing some jobs in Eastern Kentucky, and then distributed through Creation Gardens here in Louisville. So in 85 Kroger stores, you can buy Kentucky Proud beef. And we hope that it opens the door for other products as well. But let's just think about it. What else can Kentucky be known for? What's Idaho known for? Florida. Kentucky can be known for more than just bourbon, tobacco, and Kentucky Fried Chicken. We have wonderful ag products that we're already exporting that we can use that powerful Kentucky Proud brand and help sell it to the rest of the world, especially when you have UPS here, DHL, Amazon, which is located on my grandparents' farm in northern Kentucky. Imagine the day when we can overnight a Kentucky Proud country ham to a Tokyo restaurant or a Parisian restaurant and add a significant amount of value to that. So that's what my team's working on at the Kentucky Department of Agriculture. But perhaps if you were to ask me what the two biggest issues in agriculture today are, number one is low commodity prices. Farm income is half of what it was in 2013. Half of what it was in 2013. Apply that statistic to your business and occupation. It's tough times out there. If it wasn't for big yields in 2017 and hopefully big yields this year, there'll be a financial credit crunch in our community. But the Kentucky farmer perseveres and they work forward to try to make sure that we put food on the table for our own families as well. The second biggest issue in agriculture is that people don't know where their food comes from anymore. People don't know how food travels from that farm gate to their dinner plate. The average distance food moves is 1,500 miles before it gets to your grocery store. We have got to do a better job in the ag community with educating a consumer. Because when we are 1% of the population, a lot of folks simply forget the basics. And that's why we are out every day. We have 3 trailers that we haul across Kentucky, bringing agriculture into the classroom, particularly targeting young elementary and middle school students and teach them the difference between a soybean and a green bean. And let me tell you how serious of an issue this is in Kentucky agriculture. Last summer, the Washington Post published a survey that revealed some startling statistics about agriculture literacy. When asked, 16 million Americans think that chocolate milk comes from the brown cows and white milk comes from the white cows. I know we can laugh about it, but it's a serious issue. That same survey showed that 40% of American school children don't know that cheese is a dairy product. Another 40% of American school children don't know that a hamburger is actually beef. And so we've got to do a better job. And perhaps the most startling statistic of them all was a survey that came out last year that when asked, 80% of Americans said they prefer to eat food with no DNA in it. Now, when you have to explain to an adult that yes, your kale has DNA in it, the meat, the protein you eat has DNA in it, we have a bigger issue in society. But that's one reason why I love my job. I love educating. I love talking about what we do and the positive side of Kentucky agriculture. And so when we do have new alternative crops like industrial hemp, I know that our state can succeed because those farmers know how to do more with less and they're used to innovating. 2018 will be the largest industrial hemp year we've ever had. We have more industrial hemp seeds in the ground today than we did of all of 2017. It's a phenomenal crop. It's a crop that connects Kentucky's past to its future. Henry Clay was a big hemp grower. My great-grandfather used to grow hemp because the U.S. Navy needed rope in World War II, and I'm so glad that we're bringing this back. Last year, we sold over $17 million worth of industrial hemp that was grown here in Kentucky. We added 81 jobs, and we had over $25 million worth of investment. This is no longer a novelty of a crop anymore. This is serious. And that's why I'm so happy that working with Senator Mitch McConnell's office, we got language in the Senate version of the U.S. Farm Bill to legalize the crop so we can help unleash the economic impact and the potential of this crop into Kentucky. But don't think that's the only one we're focusing on. We're also looking at hops. We have a growing craft beer industry in our state. In 1980, there's only 50 craft breweries in the entire country. Now there's over 6,000. And guess what Kentucky used to grow before Prohibition put them out of business? Hops. And right now I'm so proud that I was able to secure a research grant to the United States Department of Ag. They're my first year in office. Now we have 16 commercial hops growers in our state and countless backyard enthusiasts as well growing hops. And last year, for the first time in history, we made a 100% Kentucky Proud beer using pelletized hops from Kentucky farmers. And so this is a crop we're going to continue to push as well. We're also looking at Canaf, which is a fibrous plant grown in eastern Kentucky. The F-150 is made right here in Louisville, and the Camrys made in my hometown of Georgetown use Knaft, but they're sourcing it from overseas. Why not give a Kentucky farmer a chance? And so we're literally trying to link Kentucky farmers with other industries right now. But of course, one thing that I'm most proud of is the growth of our bourbon industry. And I hope you get a chance to check out the new bourbon exhibit here at the Fraser. It's going to open at the end of this month. My staff's been working on this for over a year, because when you talk about bourbon, you're actually talking about corn. And each year, over 15 million bushels, about 6% of our total corn crop, is liquefied into our state's signature drink. And for me, I like to talk about the economic impact. That's over $60 million worth of corn being liquefied each year. And when I took over 2 years ago, I sat down with the other KDA, the Kentucky Distillers Association, asked them a simple question: how much Kentucky corn is going into Kentucky bourbon? And they said about 40%. I said, we can do better. Our corn growers are as good, if not better, than anyone else in America. Let's connect it. And so the amount of Kentucky corn going to Kentucky bourbon is up 65% in the past 2 years. And we're going to continue to connect our corn growers. Oftentimes, we're growing non-GMO or specialty crops. They're getting a premium on their yields, and connect them with the growing Distillers Association. Now, I know there's a lot of talk about trade and tariffs and tariff wars going on right now. My viewpoint on this is that if you are pro-agriculture, you want to have access to other countries. Because when we are a net exporter, it's important for us to sell our goods overseas, and because we're already doing it. Half of our soybeans, $1 billion crop, end up overseas. 1 out of every 4 rows of corn that you see across Kentucky ends up overseas. 80% of the tobacco that we still grow, over $300 million, ends up overseas. And so I could tell people that Kentucky needs international trade, but more importantly, the rest of the world needs Kentucky agriculture, because we're already exporting it right now. But at the same time, we need to call the hand on unfair trade practices around the world. Right now, American agriculture virtually has very limited, if not no, access to the EU due to non-scientific purposes and their stance on GMOs. Right now, China, when they buy a load of American soybeans, we're held at a higher threshold for foreign matter for rejection of barge loads than our competitors. That playing field needs to be leveled. And of course, when it comes to IP and making sure that our intellectual property is protected, I know the lawyers in the room will have an appreciation for this. There needs to be a mechanism to hold folks accountable, because right now there is corporate espionage in agriculture, where foreign agents have been found with corn seeds sewn into their jackets, flying it back, and stealing the genetics of R&D that happened right here in the United States. We've got to do a better job, which I was so proud. A few weeks ago, I led the first ever agriculture-only trade mission to Canada. Canada buys 20% of all of our ag exports, nearly $200 million, and they buy everything from our beef to our bourbon. You know, they send down Canadian whiskey and we send up bourbon, so that's a pretty good trade. And so I was really happy to work with the United States Ambassador to Canada, Kelly Craft, a Kentucky farm girl herself, to make sure that agriculture was well represented. And I won't forget it, I was at Woodbine, which is their version of Churchill Downs, watching Kentucky Proud horses warm up on the track, sipping some Kentucky Proud bourbon, and talking to a farmer that just bought some parts for his corn planter from a Todd County, Kentucky small business. And so we're already interconnected, and we want to make sure that we continue to have access to foreign markets in agriculture. So I want to cover 2 more things. We'll have some questions. There are some challenges in Kentucky agriculture. Number 1, the age of a Kentucky farmer in our state is 62 years old. The average age is 62 years old. Name another occupation where the average age is almost retirement age, besides the United States Senate. Okay? We have got to do a better job of motivating young Kentuckians to choose agriculture and the technology and the opportunities there, so that they can be the Elon Musk of the world in agriculture and make that innovation happen here, which is why I'm so proud that I share the vision with the late Pierce Lyons of Alltech that we want to make Kentucky the agriculture technology destination state. There is no hub right now. There is no Silicon Valley in the United States of where people go for ag tech. And so we want to make that Kentucky, and we're currently working on a plan to make that happen. Another big issue in agriculture right now is land transfer. About 1/3 of farmers over age 65 in our state have not identified who's going to take over their farming operation. And there's 5 Ds that break up family farms in America: death, disability, divorce, drinking, and drugs. And the first 3 can be mitigated by a proper estate plan. And so we're trying to encourage our farmers to get out there, have an estate plan, or perhaps give a young farmer a chance who's not in their family an opportunity to have a long-term lease and start their own farming operation. And this is something I always like to remind people, that the next best thing to having your own will is to be in somebody else's. And so you might actually luck out there. Finally, I want to have a small conversation about hunger in Kentucky. As Agriculture Commissioner, I found it appalling that 1 in 6 Kentuckians and 1 in 5 Kentucky school children are considered food insecure, meaning they don't know or have access to their next meal. I represent a state that is blessed with an abundance. We are really good at growing crops and raising livestock. And it's not right that so many fellow Kentuckians don't know where their next meal's going to come from. And so when I started 2.5 years ago, we started what's called the Kentucky Hunger Initiative. And we're partnering with everyone in the food production system, from that farmer that puts seed in the ground, to our grocery stores, to our food banks like Dare to Care here in Louisville, to our restaurants, where 40% of all prepared food is thrown into a trash can each and every day. If you were to add up all the food waste in America and put it in one pile, each year we'd fill 730 NFL-sized stadiums. We can do a better job of taking care of our fellow Kentuckians. And so I'm so proud that with our leadership at the Kentucky Department of Ag, we passed a law that gave Kentucky the strongest food donation law in America. We found out there were some grocery stores who were fearful of lawsuits, that were just throwing food away instead of donating it, so we fixed it. And other states are copying our state law verbatim. We found out that there was a lack of cold storage at our food pantries. In fact, there were instances where food pantries had to refuse donations of meat or dairy products because they didn't have a proper way to store it. I went to some of our friends, and Farm Credit Mid-America and CoBank decided to donate 156 chest freezers, and so we distributed those across the state this past fall, and we are literally reducing and removing barriers to generosity in our state. If you'd like to be a part of the conversation about reducing hunger in Kentucky, please contact my office. We have a lot of projects in the works. A lot of it's happening here in Louisville. A lot of it's happening in the West End. Please let us know how we can be helpful. And in closing, I would just like to say it's an honor to be here today. Please check out the bourbon exhibit. They put a lot of time and effort into this. It's going to open up later this month. Please take your family and some friends out to the Kentucky State Fair. If you want some Valentine's Day packages for the farm show, let me know. I can hook it up. But I'm going to leave you with a challenge. My grandparents' generation did it, and we're going to have to do it again. We're going to have to double the amount of food we produce, because the world population right now is about 7.3 billion people. We're expected to hit 9 billion by year 2050. And now that we're using food for energy and food for other